the Vidda Silence. We were six, carved from the same block of granite, or so we like to think in the comfortable lecture halls of the University of Oslo. Our bond was one of shared ambition and intellectual arrogance, the unshakable confidence of the young and brilliant who had yet to be truly tested. The crucible that was meant to forge us into a single efficient unit was this expedition, and at its head was Professor Arne Lund, a man in his late 50s, with a beard of salted pepper and eyes that had squinted at a lifetime of data points. His faith in empirical data was as solid and unyielding as the fjords of his homeland. To Arne, the universe was a complex but ultimately decipherable equation. There was no phenomenon that could not be measured, logged, and understood. He was our anchor, our patriarch of pragmatism. We, his graduate students, were the sharp, specialized tools for this task. There was Lena, our cartographer, a woman whose silence was often mistaken for shyness, but was in fact a deep cartographical focus. She saw the world not as a painting, but as a topographical map. Her sharp green eyes missed no contour of the land, no subtle shift in the watershed. She could feel the landscape's skeleton through the soles of her boots. Then came Elias, a tech savant from a world of ones and zeros. Lanky and wired on a constant stream of coffee, he spoke in the shorthand of code and specifications, his love reserved for his instruments, seismographs, magnetometers, spectral analyzers. They were his confidants, their steady hums and readouts a language more honest and reliable than human emotion. Olaf, the geologist, was a man of stone and silence. Built like one of the boulders he so loved to study, his hands, broad and calloused, could cradle a piece of gneiss and divine its ancient history, the pressure, the heat, the slow, inexorable dance of continents. He was the group's quiet pillar. I, the narrator, was the atmospheric specialist, my head perpetually in the clouds, even here where there were none. My world was one of pressure systems, ionization, and the silent, invisible dramas playing out in the thin Arctic air. And finally, there was Solveig, our biologist. Lively and freckled, with a laugh that could momentarily defy the gloom, she was our spark of life. She was already mourning the lack of visible flora, her biologist's heart aching for the stark, beautiful struggle of tundra plants, all hidden now beneath a featureless white shroud. Nothing but snow and rock, she'd sigh. The most dramatic stage, and all the players are asleep. Our mission was a testament to Arne's ambition. A 3-week, unsupported trek across the desolate plateau-like expanse of the Finnmarksvidda in northern Norway, or simply Vidda for short. It was a brutal, almost foolhardy choice for winter fieldwork. The Vidda was not a mountain range, but a vast, treeless plain, a kingdom of exposure where the wind reigned supreme. But that was the point. Arne had chosen this place and this season for its very extremity. We were to become a moving laboratory, collecting a continuous stream of atmospheric and geological readings in the perpetual twilight of the polar night. This was a time when the sun, a mere memory, never crested the horizon, and the world was cast for a few precious hours each day in a deep, ethereal blue gloom, a twilight that felt both endless and terminally ill. We were to document the breath of a sleeping giant. Our sanctuary, our tiny bastion of reason, was a sturdy, army surplus tent, its color a defiant, almost blasphemous bright orange. Inside, it was a cocoon of familiar scents, kerosene, wet wool, rehydrated stew. It was packed with the tools of our trade. Laptops swaddled in insulating foam, precision instruments nestled in custom-cut foam cases, and meticulously organized sample containers. This tent was our bright orange beacon of science and human order, a fragile argument shouted into a landscape that seemed not just indifferent, but actively, consciously hostile to both. Outside, the void waited, and the silence was already beginning to press in, listening. The first week was challenging, but exhilarating. The cold was a physical adversary we learned to respect. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls, and the snow squeaked under our boots with a sound like grinding teeth. We worked, we ate our rehydrated meals, and we huddled in our sleeping bags, telling stories in the warm glow of our gas lantern. Arn held court, his voice a steady, reassuring drone against the outer dark. The Vidda is not malicious, he'd say, tamping his pipe. It is indifferent, and indifference is something we can prepare for. The change was subtle at first. On the 10th day, the wind died, not lessened, but ceased entirely, as if a great switch had been thrown. The silence that rushed in to fill the void was unnerving. It was an active, swallowing force. The faint scratch of a ptarmigan's feet on snow, the distant crack of ice, these small proofs of a living world vanished. Our own voices felt thin and brittle, our laughter dying unnaturally in our throats, absorbed by the oppressive stillness. Lena was the first to break. During a mapping session, her pencil stilled. She looked up, her face pale. "It's listening," she whispered, her breath a pale ghost in the frozen air. Arn scoffed, but it lacked its usual conviction. "It's a high-pressure system, Lena. A statistical anomaly. Nothing more." But then came the lights. That night, as Elias was running diagnostics on his equipment, he cursed softly. "My magnetometer is going haywire. Like there's a localized storm, but the sky is clear." We crowded to the tent flap and looked out. They were not the aurora, that familiar, celestial dancer. These were different. Faint, shifting orbs of a sickly, phosphorescent yellow, the color of old bone or a fading bruise. They pulsed low in the valley below us, moving with a slow, deliberate intelligence that was neither random nor animal. Elias, frowning, set up his high-sensitivity camera and thermal scope. The viewfinder showed only blackness. "It's impossible," he muttered, his knuckles white. "They're emitting visible light, but there's no heat signature. They don't register on any spectrum I can capture. It's like they're not really there." "That's enough," Arn declared, his voice too loud. "Optical illusion. Street Elmo's fire combined with fatigue. We're all tired. To bed." We break camp at 6. Sleep was a fragile thing. I lay in my bag, listening to the profound silence. A silence so deep I could hear the blood pulsing in my ears. That's when I heard it, a sound underneath my own heartbeat. A low, resonant hum. So deep, it was more a vibration than a noise. It thrummed in the fillings of my teeth, in the marrow of my bones. I clenched my jaw, thinking it was me, until I saw Olaf's wide eyes glinting in the dark from across the tent. He heard it too. The following day, the fear had set its hooks. We packed in a sullen, hurried silence. The yellow orbs were gone, but their memory stained the landscape. Solveig, usually a fountain of chatter, was mute, her eyes constantly scanning the barren ridges. The hum came and went in waves, leaving behind a strange, metallic taste in the mouth. That night, the terror became real. I awoke to the sound of fabric tearing. Not a violent, animalistic rip, but a precise, deliberate zip. The sound of a sharp blade parting canvas with expert control. I lay frozen in my sleeping bag, my heart a frantic bird trying to escape its cage of ribs. A sliver of the starless, oppressive sky was visible through a long, clean, vertical cut in the tent wall, right near the entrance. The cold that poured in was ancient and sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. I fumbled for my headlamp, my fingers numb and clumsy. The beam swept across the interior, illuminating faces etched with identical terror. Everyone was awake, wide-eyed and breathless. Arn was already on his feet, a ice axe held in a white-knuckled grip, his rationalism a fortress under siege. "An animal," he stammered, but the words were hollow. The cut was too clean, too high off the ground. No bear, no Wolverine did that. It was then that Elias pointed a trembling finger. "Olaf," he breathed. Olaf's sleeping bag was empty. It wasn't tossed aside in a struggle. It had been unzipped with a neat, almost clinical precision. The impression of his large body was still perfectly molded into the foam pad. We scrambled outside, our beams cutting frantic, jerking paths through the absolute dark. The cold seized us instantly, a physical blow. We found him less than 20 yards from the tent. He was on his back in the snow, barefoot, clad only in his thin, wool, long underwear. His head was tilted back to the sky, his mouth slightly agape. His eyes were open and filled with a horror so absolute it seemed to have frozen the very vitreous fluid within. His skin was waxy and unnaturally pale. But it was his expression that haunts me, not of pain, not of struggle, but of an overwhelming, soul-shattering epiphany. As if in his last moments, he had been granted a glimpse of the universe's true, monstrous architecture, and the sight had simply extinguished him. Panic, cold and absolute, dissolved the last vestiges of our group cohesion. Arn's leadership shattered. Back to the tent. We barricade the entrance. We wait for dawn, he barked. But his voice was a ragged, unconvincing thing. We never made it back. The hum returned, louder this time, vibrating up from the ground itself. It was inside us, a dissonant chord playing on our nervous systems. And then the lights reappeared. Not in the valley, but here, among the rocks surrounding our camp. 3 of them, hovering at chest height, casting their sickly yellow glow on the snow, which reflected the light in a way that made the very air seem thick and jaundiced. They moved, circling us, hurting us. Lena began to sob, a raw, helpless sound that was more terrifying than the hum. "It's not listening anymore," she wailed. "It's speaking." "Run," Elias whispered, his face a mask of pure, primal terror. And we did. Reason evaporated. We were animals now, prey bolting from an unseen predator. We fled in different directions, driven by an instinct that overrode all training, all camaraderie, all love. I remember the searing burn of the air in my lungs, the jarring impact of my feet on the frozen crust, the frantic, dying dance of my torch beam as the battery failed. Behind me, I heard a scream Solveig's cut short with a sudden, final abruptness. Another sound, a crunch of rock, and a cry that was unmistakably Arn's, cut short by a noise I cannot describe and will not try to. I don't know how long I ran. My body, pushed beyond its limits, finally betrayed me. I collapsed into a small, deep ravine, the impact driving the last air from my lungs. The world swam in a haze of pain and hypothermia. The last thing I saw before unconsciousness took me was one of the yellow orbs. It had followed me. It hovered at the ravine's edge, pulsing softly. It didn't approach. It made no sound. It simply watched, a silent, unblinking eye, as the cold wrapped its arms around me and pulled me down into the dark. The rescue team found me 2 days later, half buried in snow, my core temperature barely compatible with life. I was babbling, they said, incoherent. They found the tent, sliced open from the outside. They found Olaf, frozen solid, his terrible knowledge preserved in ice. They found Elias at the base of a 100-foot cliff, his body broken from a fall he likely never saw in the dark. They found Lena and Arn huddled together in a shallow cave a mile from camp, their faces locked in the same rictus of terminal, incomprehensible terror as Olaf's. Of Solveig, they found only a single torn glove, its wool stiff with frost. The official inquest cited a compelling natural force as the cause of our flight, unexplained atmospheric phenomena, hypothermia-induced panic. It's a tidy, rational explanation, a box in which to file a tragedy. But they never could explain the other things. The fine, almost surgical cuts on Elias's fingertips, as if something had meticulously probed them. The way Lena's and Arn's radio had been fused into a single seamless lump of plastic and metal, as if by a heat so intense and focused it left the surrounding snow unmelted. The high levels of radiation on our clothing, a type that the physicists couldn't source. And then there is the final photograph, on my own camera, which I must have triggered in my fall. It's a chaotic blur of motion and snow, a smear of darkness and panic. But in the center of the frame, stark and undeniable against the ice, is a single, perfect footprint. It was large, deeply impressed, and showed three long, slender toes, arranged in a pattern that spoke of a physiology utterly alien. It was not made by a bear, a bird, or any creature known to man or fossil record. The Vidda is silent again. The snow has covered our tracks, our tent, our terror. But I hear the hum sometimes, in the dead of a quiet night, vibrating up through the floorboards of my safe, warm house. And I know, with a certainty that chills me more than any Arctic wind, that we did not simply stumble upon something. It was watching long before we arrived, a consciousness as old and as cold as the ice itself. It was a presence that had slumbered in the stone, beneath the permafrost. And on that silent, terrible night, for reasons we could never comprehend, it had simply decided to look a little closer. And we were the ones who were found.